is a continuation of a previous video. Please check the description for links to other parts.
To perpetuate the memory of 4 members of Widow Sons Lodge who served as Grand Master Masons in Virginia, and to evidence the veneration and high esteem in which these distinguished brethren were held, the Lodge presented to the Grand Lodge of Virginia at its annual communication in February 1948 the portraits of Grand Masters James A. Leitch, Peyton S. Coles, R.T.W. Duke Jr., and James B. Wood. As was observed by one who was in attendance in this communication, the session at which the portraits were presented might well have been designated Charlottesville Night at the Grand Lodge. For in thus honoring 4 of its members, also eminent citizens of the Charlottesville community, the Lodge had selected to make the presentation on its behalf 4 members of the fraternity prominent in the Charlottesville area. The portrait of Most Worshipful James A. Leitch was presented by Worshipful L.W. Wood. Brother Leitch was elected Grand Master of Masons in Virginia in 1854 and again in 1855, the first member of Widow Sons Lodge to attain this honored position. Dr. Leitch died in the service of his native state, having contracted pneumonia at the Battle of Bull Run. He was buried in Maplewood Cemetery in Charlottesville, and at his grave is a beautiful monument erected and inscribed by the Masons of Virginia. The portrait of Most Worshipful Peyton S. Coles was presented by Brother Lemuel F. Smith. Widow Sons Lodge was for the second time honored in having one of its members elevated to the office of Grand Master of Masons in Virginia. Most Worshipful Peyton S. Coles served the craft as Grand Master in 1880 and again in 1881. This distinguished Mason also presided in the highest office of the Grand Royal Arch Chapter and in the highest office of the Grand Commandery of Knights Templar. In 1 year, 1881, Peyton S. Coles filled the offices of Grand Master, Grand High Priest, and Grand Commander, an honor no other Mason in the Commonwealth of Virginia can claim. During Brother Cole's second term as Grand Master, Widow Sons Lodge, in the most interesting ceremony, presented to its distinguished member a silver trowel for his use in laying the cornerstone of the Yorktown Monument in 1881. Following his tenure as Grand Master, Brother Coles was, in 1883, appointed Grand Lecturer, a position he held until his death in 1887. Worshipful John S. Battle of Charlottesville Lodge number 55 and former Governor of Virginia presented the portrait of Most Worshipful R.T.W. Duke Jr. In recognition of his outstanding ability and distinguished service to the Masonic fraternity, R.T.W. Duke Jr., a past master of Widow Sons Lodge, was elected to serve as Grand Master of Masons in Virginia in 1898 and for a second term in 1899. He was the 3rd member of Widow Sons Lodge called upon to preside over the Grand Lodge of Virginia. At the conclusion of his distinguished career as an able lawyer, accomplished scholar, cultured gentleman, matchless orator, and devoted Mason, he was laid to rest in Maplewood Cemetery near the grave of his predecessor, past Grand Master James A. Leitch. Right Worshipful S.F. Ham, a businessman, presented the portrait of Most Worshipful James B. Wood. Again, in 1915, Widow Sons Lodge was privileged in having one of its members elected to preside as Grand Master Masons of Virginia. Most Worshipful Wood was the 4th member of the Lodge to sustain this distinguished position. Evidences of devoted an entire service to the fraternity in general, and Widow Sons Lodge in particular, over a period of more than half a century, fill the minutes and are remembered in the hearts of those who knew him. Brother Wood was also laid to rest among his Masonic brethren in Maplewood Cemetery. Thus, in Maplewood Cemetery, within a few paces of each other, are the graves of 3 past Grand Masters of Masons in Virginia, all of whom were eminent and revered Masons, members of Widow Sons Lodge. These portraits are displayed in the Grand Lodge Museum with those of other past Grand Masters. A photographic reproduction of each portrait was made and adorns the walls of Widow Sons Lodge. A more detailed biography of each of these distinguished Masons is included in the history book with the other past masters. As part of our bicentennial celebration, it is planned to replace a wreath at the graves of these brothers. The name of another past Grand Master of Masons in Virginia was associated with Widow Sons Lodge. In 1885 and again in 1886, the Grand Lodge of Virginia was presided over by Most Worshipful Francis H. Hill. This distinguished Mason and lawyer from Madison, while not a member of our lodge at that time, had first seen Masonic light in Widow Sons Lodge during 1865. Membership is of interest to most keepers of statistics. Historic Masonic membership trends somewhat follow the major conditions that existed, such as the Morgan Affair, wars, depressions, and recently the general decline of all mainline churches and fraternal organizations. The time of the Morgan Affair was a particularly unhappy period in the history of Freemasonry in America, when a violent campaign against Freemasonry was launched in many of the states. It arose out of the death of William Morgan. Mr. Morgan, together with a newspaper man named David Miller, published an expose of Freemasonry. He was subsequently reported to have been murdered, and this led to the anti-Masonic campaign launched by some irresponsible men for political purpose and based on false accusations that a group of Freemasons had conspired to kill Morgan for his exposure of Masonic secrets. Freemasons were personally attacked in many states, and scores of lodges were closed between 1829 and 1838. It was 65 years later, 1864, before Widow Sons Lodge had 100 members. 40 years later, the membership was over 200. And in 14 years later, the membership had grown to 300. The membership grew ever slowly during the first 50 years, and through the strong leadership of influence of Most Worshipful Light, the membership took an upward turn. The influx of new members pushed the membership over 100 during the Civil War, and membership remained steady over the next 30 years. The Depression caused the membership to decline. During and after World War II, membership resumed the rapid growth experienced in the early years of the 20th century. The membership reached its peak in 1862 at 384. And as of this paper, they had 366 members. Now, it is interesting. In November 1966, representatives of the 8 Widow Sons Lodges in the United States met in Washington, D.C., to form an association of Widow Sons Lodges. The 8 lodges, all east of the Mississippi River, all as follows. Widow Sons number 60 in Charlottesville, Widow Sons 66 in Branford, Connecticut, number 75 in Camden, North Carolina, number 150 in Emporia, Virginia, number 335 in Livingston, New York, number 519 in Roanoke Rapids, North Carolina, number 571 in Paulding, Ohio, and number 610 in Sydney, Arkansas. Widow Sons Lodge number 60, represented by Worshipful Burris and Worshipful Manson, became charter members of the association and invited the lodge to meet in Charlottesville during the fall of 1968. This association has offered the brethren in these lodges a tremendous opportunity to meet and enjoy fellowship every 2 years. The host lodge for the 1998 biennial meeting was Widow Sons Lodge number 519 in Roanoke Rapids, North Carolina. There has been a long relationship between the Charlottesville Masons and the Jewish community, and one chapter of the lodge history is devoted to our Jewish brethren. The first Jew to arrive in Albemarle County was named Isaac. He was born in Frankfurt, Germany, about 1760, owned a number of lots in Charlottesville, and made his living as a merchant. He was also a Freemason. We do not know what lodge he was made a Mason, but we know he affiliated with Door to Virtue number 44 in Charlottesville in 1795. He later became a member of Widow Sons Lodge. He died in 1837, was buried in Meshalom Cemetery in Richmond. David Isaac traded all kinds of goods from his Main Street shop, the current site of the Williams Corner bookstore. He earned a footnote in the history of the University of Virginia by selling Thomas Jefferson's overseer a ball of twine that was used to lay out the first of the university buildings, Pavilion number 7, the cornerstone of which was laid by Widow Sons Lodge. Brother William Reinhold is the 134th Master Mason to serve as Worshipful Master of Widow Sons Lodge in 1899. James A. Leach, a physician, served 8 years. Charles W. Carter, a physician, served 8 years. William Wharton Baker, a lawyer and first librarian at the university, served 6 years. Valentine W. Southall, a lawyer, served 6 years. John H. Craven, a farmer, served 5 years. And Josiah Bigelow, who advanced to become Deputy Grand Master, served 4 years. So all of those men served multiple years as Worshipful Master of this lodge. You may find it interesting to know that 17 Worshipful Masters were businessmen, 13 were lawyers, 7 were merchants, 7 were physicians, 5 were farmers, 4 were engineers, 5 were salesmen, and 3 were dentists. Plans have been completed for the lodge's bicentennial celebration. Again, this was in 1999. And I am personally excited about the prospects with this celebration holds for this lodge and its members. And then he thanks you for your attention and will be delighted to answer any questions. Any questions for Brother Simpson?
You must be out of breath.
I'm sorry I drank all my water too fast.
I wondered when you mentioned you were going to read this or wanted me to read it. I should have told you. I knew it was 19 pages, and it might be a tad bit long. But
yeah, it did seem to like. Well, it was similar to another one I'd read, which was about half an hour, so I thought it'd be okay. But I think I went about 40 minutes with that. So a lot of really good information. It was very interesting. It was. I realized you were pulling from. There was a book that was published, and you were just pulling selected portions out of the book or out of the history and putting together the book, or.
Yeah, the book that was published in 1999 was the first edition.
Mm-hmm.
Second edition ran out of print and was printed again in 2000. I don't know, maybe 14. I don't know. Both copies are in the Grand Lodge Library.
Well, I mean, because it was a history, obviously this happened here and then this happened here. And so it wasn't like one continuous story, but it was highlights throughout the history of the lodge. The bit about McKinley was really interesting. I love the bit about the apron where someone handed him an apron to wear and then he forgot to put it on. So technically he used it. I like that part.
Could I ask a question? Widow's Sons, we know as Masonic riders, motorcycle lodges.
Oh.
Is there any connection to that Widow's Sons lodge?
It's interesting that when the charter was applied for, when you go back and look at the Grand Lodge proceedings, it's listed as Widow's Son, or whenever the charter was applied for. And then when it was given, it was Widow's Son's Lodge, and that was the lodge, the way it was used. It's interesting, most of our lodges in Virginia here wear aprons with blue colors, but back then, everything was green. I think, if I recall correctly, over in Scotland, a lot of the lodges, I have an apron, past master's apron from the lodge over there, and it's green. Of course, it has the clan tartan on the apron as well, but the green was used for probably 50 years before it was changed to blue.
Yeah, well, green aprons, pure green aprons, tend to be Province and Grand Lodge. But each lodge in Scotland has its own apron anyway.
Oh, wow.
And that can be any colour under the sun, to be honest with you. Great many of them with a tartan edging.
Yeah.
One thing I'd like to say about the Widow's Sons motorcycle group that you're talking about, while they are very active here in Virginia, of course, for the age of the lodge, it was more based, the name Widow's Son was more based on Masonic lore.
I gathered that.
We do have the clubs very active in Virginia, and I'm sure they're very active where you are as well. You would have brought it up, but but the thing is it's based off the same lore, but that's all it is really. It's the time and it's Masonic, and that's it.
No, I just wondered if the Motorcycle Association it actually derived itself from.
I don't believe so.
No, it came out of Virginia. Outside of Virginia.
No.
Yeah. What's interesting is we have now. This is the paper today was on Widow's Sons Lodge number 60. Now I'll spell this out: Widow '(S) Sons apostrophe Lodge number 60. That's based out of Charlottesville. In
Yeah.
Virginia, there is also a widow's son, widow apostrophe S, S-O-N, Lodge number 50 in Emporia, Virginia. Not exactly the same name, but very close.
Very close. Yeah.
I think it's 150.
I said what? Did I say 150?
I think you said 50.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, 150 in Emporia. Sorry, I'm out of breath. Sorry. Brother Brian, go ahead.
Earlier, you were talking about Lee Lodge. Is that the same Lee Lodge that's around now?
Lee Lodge?
Lee Lodge 209. It started as a military lodge chartered by the Grand Lodge of Virginia with the Confederate forces. It is currently a chartered craft lodge in Waynesboro. In fact, I'm a member of that as well.
So you
I
probably
live
know
in-
Mark Phillips. You probably know Mark Phillips then.
Yes. I do.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's a very good brother, very knowledgeable too.
yeah, he's one of our group, with the ESSA group.
Yeah, Lee Lodge was named after General Lee. In fact, they thought his willingness to allow them to use his name, and they have the correspondence on all that. Which in some ways has come under scrutiny by others, particularly in these times, which is unfortunate.
Yes.
What's interesting is I was under the impression, just not thinking of buildings and airports and whatever, that Masonic lodges normally aren't named after people who are still alive. But turns out a whole bunch were. There's no restriction. You don't have to be dead to get a lodge after you. And a number of our lodges were named after famous Masons, the current Grandmaster sometimes, past Grandmasters, or just famous people in the area. But one was named after this guy. Best I could tell, he was like a prominent, he was like a soldier, a colonel or something, and it was his name, but he was known in that area, but he wasn't a Mason that I could tell. But apparently local history, he was a legend, so they chose the name of the lodge after him. So it's always fun trying to figure out just where these names come from, how they came up with that name for, why would this lodge be named after, who this guy, if he's not even a Mason.
Well, that's like Treadwell Lodge 213. We're named after someone we don't really know if he was a Mason or not. There have been, before that, there were 3 other lodges in Clark County,
Okay.
but, and so now Treadwell, and that is interesting. The only thing we can tell is that he was a prominent individual in the community.
Thank you, Christopher, for a very interesting talk.
Yes.
Great to be with you guys. But I've got to go and start sorting out some dinner.
So what time is it right when?
It's a 4:45 in the evening.
Okay. Well, so this time works well for you all then, because it's early evening for y'all. It's not too early in the morning for us. We
It's,
normally meet.
3 o'clock in the afternoon it started.
Okay.
We do have some that start at 4 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock.
Right.
Daily one in 5 starts at 8:30 every night of the week.
Oh wow.
Anyway, thanks again, brother.
Thank you all for coming. It's great to have this. And
Hopefully see you again.
yes, I hope to keep having these on Saturday mornings. That seems to work well, and I appreciate everyone coming out. If anybody has anything else to say, or we're going to go and call it